This just in. Late breaking news this hour. In the United States presidential election that was held on the 7th of November, 1972, the incumbent Republican President Richard Milhous Nixon emerged triumphant over his opponent, George McGovern, in a landslide victory, winning by the fourth largest landslide margin in history, 23.15%, and parallels to his downfall have been repeatedly used to the current putsch to impeach the current president, Donald J. Trump, a political controversy in which Virginia Congressman Don Beyer has taken to the forefront, recently becoming the first member of the congressional delegation from his state to demand impeachment. Perhaps it is ironic that in his most recent election, he managed to defeat his Republican opposition, the 26-year-old Thomas O., by the largest landslide in the history of Virginia's 8th Congressional District, an election where his Republican challenger attained only 23.68% of the vote, as mounting evidence continues to emerge, implicating the former U.S. ambassador to Switzerland and Liechtenstein in scandal that may soon result in his removal also from office. At the root of the controversy is a pending civil action, under the Federal Racketeering and Corrupt Organizations Act, to be commenced by Beyer's former adversary, the unabashed conservative Major Mike Webb, who had been the putative frontrunner and loudest voice in opposition in the opening months of the 2016 campaign. Under the RICO Act, a civil action requires evidence of at least 2 predicate acts in racketeering activities, which are enumerated in 18 U.S.C. Section 1961. Specifically, 18 U.S.C. Section 1962 provides that it shall be unlawful for any person who has received any income derived, directly or indirectly, from a pattern of racketeering activity, to use or invest, directly or indirectly, any part of such income, or the proceeds of such income, in acquisition of any interest in, or the establishment or operation of, any enterprise which is engaged in, or the activities of which affect, interstate or foreign commerce. It shall be unlawful for any person through a pattern of racketeering activity to acquire or maintain, directly or indirectly, any interest in or control of any enterprise which is engaged in, or the activities of which affect, interstate or foreign commerce. It shall be unlawful for any person employed by or associated with any enterprise engaged in, or the activities of which affect, interstate or foreign commerce, to conduct or participate, directly or indirectly, in the conduct of such enterprises' affairs through a pattern of racketeering activity, and it shall be unlawful for any person to conspire to violate any of the provisions of this section. Over the past week, prima facie evidence linking the auto sales mogul, and second wealthiest man in Congress, to an attempt to bribe Major Mike Webb and entice him to accept a lucrative position with the coveted federal employer, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and bribery, a violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 201, is the 5th criminal offense listed amongst the prohibited racketeering activities in the RICO Act under 18 U.S.C. Section 1961. And the evidence tying Beyer to an attempt to bribe his former opponent is substantial and credible, beyond a reasonable doubt. Under the holding in U.S. v. Heard, a case decided by the Fifth Circuit in 2013, the bribery statute makes it a crime to directly or indirectly, corruptly give anything of value to any public official, with intent to influence any official act. Accordingly, either the government, or, alternatively, a RICO plaintiff, must prove the specific intent to give or receive something of value in exchange for an official act to be performed sometime in the future. In that case, the disputed thing of value was a gift of several golf getaway packages, but in this instance, the thing of value at issue is a federal job, which even attorneys for the Merit Systems Protections Board have argued in litigation currently in the Federal District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia is something that thousands of people desire. Yet, in their motion to dismiss an action brought by Major Mike Webb involving that job offer, they mock his characterization of the transaction as a bribe, chide him for bringing suit about the transaction, and have argued, contrary to 10 U.S.C. Section 1221, that he, as a federal job applicant, even has standing to bring the suit. One legal argument available to Beyer's attorneys is to attempt to define the transaction as the lesser offense of an illegal gratuity, which is a misdemeanor, under 18 U.S.C. Section 201, paragraph C, and which carries a penalty of fine and/or imprisonment up to 2 years. Under the Fifth Circuit's decision in here, the illegal gratuity statute makes it a crime to directly or indirectly give anything of value to any public official, or because of any official act performed or to be performed by such public official distinguishable from bribery, which requires that the defendant intend to influence an official act or a quid pro quo, a specific intent to give or receive something of value in exchange for an official act. However, it is not required that the parties to the bribe have identified a particular official act, but only that the government prove the specific intent to give or receive something of value in exchange for an official act to be performed sometime in the future. Under the Fifth Circuit's decision in Heard, an illegal gratuity, on the other hand, does not require a quid pro quo because it does not require the intent to influence any official act and can take the form of a reward for some future act that the public official will take, and may already have determined to take, or for a past act that he has already taken. An illegal gratuity still requires a link between something of value and a specific official act. It is not enough that the gratuity was given because of the official's office. The argument that the federal job offer, which would have precluded Major Mike Webb from continuing in the political contest, by imposition of the Hatch Act, codified at 5 U.S.C. Section 7323, paragraph A, subparagraph 3, which makes it a prohibited activity for a federal employee to run for the nomination or as a candidate for election to a partisan political office, was just an illegal gratuity may be problematic for Beyer because several problems that even became apparent to senior officials at DIA as late as the 30th of December, 2015, as is disclosed in an email released under the Freedom of Information Act to Major Mike Webb. In this smoking gun email, a deliberative process document, which is usually not releasable under FOIA Exemption 5, this individual, who is at least the senior procurement officer at DIA, appears to be shielding himself from liability, raising up to his higher headquarters, an individual who is at least the senior procurement officer in the Office of the Deputy Chief of Staff for Intelligence at the Pentagon, to decide whether or not to extend a job offer to a rank-ordered alternate, who was deemed to be qualified for the position, while also mentioning the applicant next in line behind him. This email is suspicious because no competent hiring manager would require assistance from his superiors to determine how a rank-ordered selection operates in a merit-based civil service system, or, at least one would hope. And this senior officer at DIA presents yet another problem at the conclusion of this communication. The agency requirement for the position has expired and the position is no longer required. Again, this should be a no-brainer, as is often said, but, for some reason it was enough of a crisis for this senior intelligence source to raise to his higher headquarters. Oh. In the Fifth Circuit decision in Heard, the defendants were permitted to offer evidence of the existence of a habit, in which a party must at least demonstrate a regular practice of meeting a particular kind of situation with a specific type of conduct. A bit suggests a regular response to a repeated specific situation that has become semi-automatic. Although a precise formula cannot be proposed for determining when the behavior may become so consistent as to rise to the level of habit, adequacy of sampling and uniformity of response are controlling considerations. Yet, like the defendants in the Heard case, given a controversial history of the Obama administration, under his Secretary of State and Democrat Party presidential nominee Hillary Clinton, Beyer is unlikely to succeed on the merits of a defense argument that it was a regular practice for senior intelligence officials in the Defense Department to offer jobs to persons to perform agency requirements that no longer existed, raising a reasonable inference of suspicion as to undue influence. A felony violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 207, paragraph E, subparagraph 1, which carries a punishment of up to 5 years in prison, and/or fine up to $50,000 or the amount of the compensation involved, whichever is greater. Most troubling for Beyer has been the manner in which he and his office have handled the incident, at least after becoming aware of the transaction. Rather than seeking to contain the possible damage, Beyer and his staff have not only engaged in denial and evasion, but have also managed to implicate other parties, including both Senators Tim Kaine and Mark Warner. In August 2017, after Beyer ignored requests from Major Mike Webb for assistance in obtaining information under a FOIA request, Kaine, at first, decided to toss the hot potato back at his colleague in the lower house, assuring Major Mike Webb that Beyer would eventually respond. But, over 2 years after the fact, at his recent town hall, Beyer was telling his supporters that he had only just been made aware of the situation when Major Mike Webb presented to him at that event. And, after the event, Noah Simon, the district office director for Beyer, for unstated reasons, decided to block communications, after Beyer had publicly promised to work with Major Mike Webb to resolve the matter and clear his name. As late as election day in the 2018 midterms, Kaine's office was refusing to discuss the matter with reporters from populist media, a story that, for unknown reasons, was deleted shortly after the midterms. And, on election day, Kaine's staffers were feigning confusion, for unknown reasons, stating that they believed that the matter involved a personnel security clearance for an employee at the Department of Agriculture. Kaine, in addition to being the vice presidential nominee for Hillary Rodham Clinton, serves on the Senate Armed Services Committee, with oversight in matters involving the Department of Defense, of which the Office of the Dissent and DIA are a part. Had Kaine succeeded in the 2016 election, it is likely that Beyer would have ascended to the Senate seat vacated by Kaine. But the cancerous metastasizing of Beyer on other senior Democrats has spread to House Oversight Chairman Elijah Cummings, who has been disassociating himself with sponsorship of the All Circuits Review Act, Public Law 115 to 195, which Major Mike Webb had seized upon to attempt to escape the lack of a quorum at the Merit Systems Protection Board, to no avail, when even the Fourth Circuit, attorneys for the MSPB and the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit refused to even utter the name of the legislation that was designed to provide a quicker resolution for whistleblower appeals, and which Major Mike Webb had attempted to use as a lifeboat to escape the stalemate at MSPB that even that adjudicative body has claimed in court papers attempted to address just before the enactment of the legislation that Cummings had sponsored. Webb has argued that that measure is unconstitutional because it promises the nullity of a final order that is not adverse, which, under Federal Rule of Appellate Procedure, is not sufficient to obtain review. MSPB has countered with the curious argument that any litigant requesting withdrawal in exchange for a final order has a derivative aggrieved status by virtue of just being a litigant in court. Even more troubling for Beyer is the fact that Major Mike Webb, according to the requirements listed in the federal job announcement, is not even qualified to hold the senior procurement analyst job, having never held a federal job at the next lower level and never having had that level of experience and training in procurement. Moreover, a MSPB action dismissed last year before Major Mike Webb commenced his current action regarding his job offer at DIA, involved a rejection of reinstatement eligibility for a paralegal specialist position with the Department of Justice in the Environment and Natural Resources Division. Beyer sits on the subcommittee that exercises oversight for that activity, and perhaps it is just a coincidence that after his promotion to the powerful Ways and Means Committee, the Internal Revenue Service began claiming that Webb owed federal income tax on over $20,000 he was alleged to have made in 2015, the year that he began his foray into politics. The disputed income is being pursued for owed taxes at both the state and federal level, but Major Mike Webb argues that there is no way that a GS9, employed for only 10 months in a year, might possibly earn over $160,000. Please stay tuned for more breaking news, as this story continues to develop. At WEBB, we get the news first. Back to you, in the studio Mo.
This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.